Alrighty, so a little more scrubbing on the engine compartment. Definitely got a lot more grease, dirt out, and crusty old paint. So I'll go back in and scrub it down a little bit more and do some rattle can high temp satin black. Clean it all up. And here is my new fuel line, 5/16 by 5 feet. Got over at the guys over at Napa, and I picked up a new tube cutter while I was at Home Depot, but you know, automotive parts stores usually have those as well. My old one was on its way out from the brake job that he did, so it's always good to have an extra one. And I can get started on measuring and bending some tubing. Alright, I'm going to test fit the battery tray, rattle can the entire engine compartment. Looks a heck of a lot better. Some semi-gloss black. Now I'll see if I can get working on the fuel line. Okay, when bending tube, you're going to need a tube bender, and this particular one I have has a wheel for the 5/16 as well as 3/8, and then the 1/4 inch, and then I believe a 3/8. So this works out pretty good, and the only issue I'm going to have is making sure that I have a pretty tight 90-degree turn when it comes around the fuel, not the fuel rail, but the frame rail in the car. So we'll have to try that out. Well, I found my other tube bender, but testing out this one, I found that if I try to just crimp it all at once, I get something like this. If I just basically squeeze it from the handle here, it kinks up. So basically what you have to do is sort of start, and then you have to work the tubing around and slowly pull the handle together to get this wide 90. But it's not really going to work for me for frame rail work, because the 90s have to be a little bit tighter radius than this. I'm not too pleased with that, but I did find my other tube bender, and this one has a little bit better rounding abilities, so I'm going to give it a try and see if I can get a tighter radius than this. So highly recommend just getting some tubing and practice before you go ahead and get started on a finalized tube setup. In my case, for a fuel line. Obviously these ends are for a brake line, but they can also be used for fuel line. But I need to get going on this, so let's give it a try. Alright, so what you're going to want to do is get your tubing basically started inside this notch and work it inside this groove. And this bender has 3 slots to choose from, and I'm going to use the one that works appropriately for this size tube, which is just underneath 5/16 of an inch. But I'll get it snugged up and get it to fit. So going this way, it's hard to do with the one hand. Alright, let's see if I can get this to work. On the outside, pull this around. Let me try something else. This isn't working out too well for demonstration. Alright, let's try it again. Obviously get to my 90-degree mark here, back it off. That's pretty tight. I like that. That's a lot better than this. twice as long. This should work out pretty good. So I'll probably get some coat hanger, measure it out on the actual frame rail on the car. Obviously get the orientation right as far as the degree. Shouldn't be too bad. And then go from there. But this is much better. Highly recommend this one. Alright. Getting back to relocating the fuel line. You know, obviously for the 6-cylinder it comes up way up here because the fuel pump would be right here. But on a V8 you're going to have the exhaust manifold in this area right here. So on V8 the fuel line, hard line, comes in about here and then does a 90 that way and then gets on the other side of the frame rail, comes up inside the underneath the wheel well area, follows the frame rail and comes out this hole. So what I'm going to do is take this clip off and relocate it, put it down here, and I will way over there I will make a piece and start getting the orientation correct. And I'll have to plug that fuel line because I know I got gas in the tank. So let's give it a try. Okay, back to the fuel line. I just measured underneath the car where the existing cut was with the rubber hose, just about underneath the driver. I'm going to come 18.5 inches and then I'll make a 90-degree bend this way if this was the frame rail. And then I'll come inside here and take some more measurements off the car. Not horribly exciting, but just an FYI. Okay, I've marked my tubing here for 18.5 inches. What I'm going to do, get it in the bending tool, but instead of having the 18.5 here, I'm going to move it over, this is out of focus, to the 0, which is right here. So I can line that up. Alright. Hard to do with one hand. Right there. So when it actually starts to bend, it'll bend at the 0 and then rotate over to 90 degrees. That way this distance isn't added onto the overall length of the tubing that I'm gotta get. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this tube, this side of the tube, a little bit upward. So I'll do the 90, and then when I bend it at 90 degrees here, what it's going to do is come up at an angle once I do the full 90. Because if you look at it on a profile, the actual fuel line comes up, over, and then comes up. So I have to clear the frame rail and then head towards just to the top of the frame rail, and I need to kick it up a few degrees. That way the orientation is better. Alright, so what I have is the starting point over there, comes along here, makes the 90, goes underneath the frame rail, and then kicks up at an angle, and then I will bring it closer to the frame rail, right about in here, and then I'll have to do some custom bending, and then probably a rise and a dip, and then towards over here I'll do another 90, and it should go through the hole in the inner fender well. But that's the angle that I wanted. Pretty good start so far. Here's a better idea. This is where the connection is going to be, the new one. This is where the clip is. It comes out a little bit. Treat the 2x4 as a frame rail, and then you get the idea of it coming up, and then it'll turn back and jog over about right here is about where the spindle or the lower A arm would be, and then you come over here and then you'll make it 90. So the 2x4 idea sort of helps with the scale and how the orientation should go. Okay, so now this is going to make better sense. Starting point was right there. Do some custom bending, obviously tweaking to the clip. The bend goes past the frame rail. Alright, I'll show it from the other side here in a second. Okay, now from the other side, inside the wheel well, up It's just on top of the frame rail, just below your brake line hose slash connector, up out the homemade grommet here, and then out into the engine compartment, and then I will get my tube cutter and cut that around there, and then I'll be ready to go. Alright, so the heart of Project Nickel and Dime is going to be our Ford 302 engine that I've got to break down. I got this used from somebody on the Ranchero forum. He had problems with some oiling, and as I was breaking down the engine, it turns out they didn't torque down the oil pump. So they basically scored cylinder number 5 in the cylinder wall, but the engine didn't lock up. So thankfully they stopped and decided to go another route. So upon taking things apart, I also noticed things like timing chain stretched, but the issue is going to be breaking down the rest of the 302. Clues like this tell you that this engine's already been bored 30 over. Obviously has a little bit of crosshatch, you can't see it, this lighting. Typical carbon buildup. Some minor leaks for the coolant. But overall, lifter valley looks pretty clean, the lifter bores look clean. Cam doesn't seem to be wiped out, but again, I'll have to take it all apart and do some more investigative look. Here's the scoring on number 5 piston. As you can see, the aluminum started to break down, actually started to compress the rings. You can't even move them. Also noted too was that the orientation for the ring gap was not correct, so it wasn't reassembled correctly, but this is not good. Here's a close-up of the bearings that started to break down. Again, not good. So we'll see what happens when I pull the crank out and check the mains. Here's cylinder number 5. Not good. So hopefully we can home this out, but if not, we'll try to go 40 over. And if 40 over doesn't work, well, we'll be looking at a new block, because after 40 it's just not worth it. The condition of the cylinder heads isn't too bad, but they will have to be redone. These are 1965 castings, 289 castings, while the block is a 68 302. But as I said before, in the previous rebuild, since then, this is rebuilt, and according to the bearings, in about 1997. So the heads are going to have to be gone through, and or I'll look into the option of aluminum aftermarket heads. An indication of too many valve jobs shows that some valves are actually sunk in the seats compared to others. So it obviously need a total rework. Time and money.